We're here again with Pat. Thanks for joining us this morning. So we're going to talk about the debt ceiling. What is the national debate, and what does this mean for Oklahomans?
Well, it means a lot to all of us, and I've had things going through my brain like people that were sometimes accused over the last 2 decades of being Cassandras, just complaining and wailing and bemoaning, were actually Isaiahs. They were prophets. We are at a stage where the debt total, the total national debt, and what it is, which we've discussed on recent segments, is front and center, and that's because of the debt limit ceiling debate that's unfolding in Washington, which is, the accumulation of annual deficits has reached the point where the debt limit has to be increased or you have problems, and the problems are substantial. On the other side of that, what the data is showing is that it's probably not time to simply stick with the way we've been doing things in the past, which is periodically to increase the debt limit. 70% of gross domestic product by the end of this year versus 62% at the end of last year. That's the percentage of the gross domestic product that's being consumed by national debt. I mean, I could run on. There's competing ideas on how to address this. At the risk of some oversimplification, Democrats want to tinker with spending and allow tax increases. Now, it's often said that, well, we just need to repeal the Bush tax cuts. Well, the Bush tax cuts aren't tax cuts anymore. They're part of the existing framework. And if you repeal them, you're increasing taxes, and then you have the downside of impacting economic activity. Could go on. What is being said is that the Congressional Budget Office is now projecting that if things stay in place, you'll be at 70% of the GDP by the end of this year, projecting forward it exceeds the national economy's total value by the end of 2023, and then it's 190% of GDP by 2035. How many times can you go over and over this? We're at an inflection point or a tipping point where a fundamental decision is going to need to be made about what do we do next. There's arguments to be made on both sides. The only give I see from the Republicans is possible enhancement of revenues, however, through the mechanism of making the tax code simpler and doing away with some of the controversial and sometimes not so controversial exemptions. That's going to be a tough call for the Republicans. This, however, is Tom Coburn's moment. He has been talking about this his entire career in public life. He is absolutely now ratified by the evidence, so we'll see what comes next.
Interesting topic, but also another interesting topic that you've been watching, the Open Meetings Act. There's a state agency who actually violated the Open Meetings Act. I mean, is this common practice?
Yeah, well, they think they didn't. It's the DHS Commission because they did take a roll call vote, but they did so behind closed doors. Very quickly, they went into executive session, totally legitimate, to discuss certain matters, some investigations and some potential legal issues for the agency. Then when and people left for the meeting. One guy, my pal Peter Rudy from OklahomaWatchdog.org, stuck around. They come back out and everybody's dispersing, and he said, "Is the meeting over?" And he was basically told, yes, there's a problem with that. You have to take the vote to adjourn, and if you took any formal action in executive session, then it has to be formalized in open session, and adjournment has to take place in open session. So he's been stirring the pot. And eventually he actually contacted the Oklahoma County DA and described the situation to him, so it's now being looked at. The agency says they didn't violate. Now, this comes in the context of, for example, out in the Panhandle, some governing boards have had meetings and not done proper posting of what they were going to cover, and the DA out there has said he's not going to prosecute criminally or anything like that, but he's issuing them instructions because they did violate the open records. The open meetings provisions. Overcompassing all of this, Freedom of Information Oklahoma and the Society of Professional Journalists are getting very concerned, and they're looking at the possibility of, how the tax pledge has been kind of a popular thing among conservatives, to pledge that you won't do anything to increase taxes, and people are pressured one way or another to sign that. Well, there's talk of a openness in government pledge from a lot of us in the journalism profession, so you might see that popping up.
It's an interesting topic, and I think that a lot of agencies, at least from my experience, they think they're going to get away with it. So
sometimes they think sometimes it's inadvertent, although a state agency, they ought to know better.
All right, thank you, Pat. Well, you can check out a lot more from Pat on his news website, which is CapitolBeatOK.com.